This light back here is like beaming. Excuse my light. Says I gotta anyway, you need to hear this. You need to hear this. The two mistakes I made when trying to adopt a whole food plant-based diet and how to avoid them. You need to hear this. Okay, so if you are wanting or trying to adopt a whole food plant-based diet, listen to this. So there were two things that I did, mistakes I made. The first one, I was eating too much fat in uh, in the form of nuts, oil. I was eating lots of nuts. I was making different dips with nuts. I was making dressings with nuts. I was making nut meat. I was just eating entirely too many nuts. I was consuming too much fat. Also, you see it everywhere, the oyster fried mushrooms. I was eating a lot of fried uh, plant-based foods, frying them, using a lot of oil, like olive oil, my salads and my sautés. I was just consuming too much fat. And the fat, consuming too much fat, it was keeping me bloated and gassy and just not feeling, well, within my digestive system. So I was eating just entirely too much fat. And so I had to, what I did to avoid using too much fat, I started to eliminate oil out of my diet. So when I would cook, I usually cook with water or some veggie broth or some really dry wine that didn't have a lot of additives or sugar, high sugar content. And I would use that instead of using the oil when I was cooking, or I would bake things using on parchment paper. Some people use an air fryer. I'm not a proponent of air fryers because of what they're made of. And so those are the things that I did to avoid consuming so much fat. And it made me feel a whole lot better. So that was one of the biggest mistakes I made, consuming too much fat. Because I was trying to find, I think I would, though the fat was making, in my mind, making me feel satiated, but it really wasn't. It was making me want to consume more. So that was the thing, consuming too much fat. That was the first mistake I made. And so the way to avoid that again is cooking without the use of oil. I also use more vinaigrettes instead of always making my salad dressings with the nuts. But I like creamy dressings, but I started using, balancing it out, you know, and making my dips or my pate using other forms, other things besides just nuts. The second mistake I made, which is a common mindset among most people, is just eating everything in moderation. Just not over consuming, not eating too much of this and not eating too much of that. Just having a little bit on the weekends or during celebrations. People do it during holidays. So those that was another mistake I made, thinking that I can eat everything in moderation. So me, I am a salt person. I'm a salty person. I love my chips, popcorn, and sometimes I like some sweets. And I was saying, oh, I can have these things in moderation. I was still drinking my coffee, and I don't like my coffee without a sweetener. So I would have my coffee, and I wasn't using white sugar, but I was using maple syrup. And so I was just drinking that coffee and having those snacks, you know, 3 or 4 times a week sometimes, or have some popcorn or some chips. And I said, well, I eat good, so I can have this as a snack when you want to sit down and watch some Netflix or whatever. And so I was just eating these snacks in my mind in moderation, because moderation is different to each one of us. Moderation could be for some just on the weekend, or moderation could be once a week. For some people, moderation is just a little bit, 5 days a week. So moderation can't, it's not really defined. So moderation could be anything, whatever we want it to be. And moderation is what got most of us in these situations. You know, that one donut twice a week, every week for twice a week. It's probably the thing that gave us diabetes or put on the extra pounds. So it's not, if that's what put us in the situation, it's not the solution to get us out of the situation. So I was eating too many, uh, what I would say, you know, I'm not a big junkie, but damn chips and popcorn and stuff like that, and that coffee, you know, that was that was doing me in. I wasn't seeing the kind of results or feeling the way I would like to feel. But once I took them out of my diet, I started to feel a whole lot better, because when you're trying to eliminate a chronic health challenge, you can't moderate. The answer is abstinence, because that's the only way you're going to regain optimal health. So I was moderating, and that was the second biggest mistake that I made. So the way to avoid that, if you're trying to combat a chronic health issue, you want to have abstinence from those things, from that processed food, from that refined sugar. And some people think consider maple syrup okay, but if you eat that, uh, if you're choosing that in your coffee every day, that's a lot of sugar. If you want to have some sweetener, use whole food. You can get some dates and you can soak them, and then you can blend them up into a paste and use that as a sweetener. And the coffee, if you're dealing with chronic stress, you want to eliminate the coffee, the caffeine, if you're trying to eliminate chronic stress. So the answer to way to avoid it is abstinence. Until you reach that level of optimal health, you've learned to have self-control over your eating. You've overcome your addictions to certain foods. Then after that, you want to have something down it, and you taking care of yourself, working out and everything. But and if you're at the stage where you're trying to eliminate a chronic health issue, abstinence is what you need. Everything in moderation doesn't work. So those were the two mistakes that I made when I adopted a whole food plant-based diet. And you may have heard that I was still feeling sick, even though I had got rid of my pre-hypertension, my pre-diabetes, my non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, my chronic fatigue. I got rid of those things, but I was still not feeling at my optimum, and I was still dealing with a lot of chronic stress. So these foods, they don't help chronic stress; they exacerbate it. So these were the two biggest mistakes I made, and the way to avoid it was, one, too much fat, using the oil, broth, uh, veggie broth, dry wine, baking my things, steaming stuff, and it can still be flavorful. Don't think because it's not saturated in fat, it can't be flavorful. It can still be flavorful. But just doing that made a big difference, and especially if you're dealing with cholesterol or hypertension, those types of these issues, it's such a great way to eliminate a lot of fat out of your diet. The second thing is, get that notion out of your head of everything in moderation. If you're trying to combat a chronic health issue, it's no moderation. That's what got us into the situation, is that moderating. Okay, so you wanna have abstinence from that processed food, that refined sugar, uh, those fatty fried foods, all of that. Abstinence, and you will see what a difference it makes. So I'd like to invite you to a master class on Friday, November 29th at 7 p.m., where I will be talking about 3 ways to thrive as a caregiver, where we will touch on this very topic that we're talking about tonight, how to adopt a whole food plant-based diet in a way that will help to uh, eliminate your chronic health issues, and how to the right way to adopt a whole food plant-based diet, as well as other issues that can help you thrive as a caregiver. Because when you're at your optimum, then you can really be of service. You can be an asset to those that you care for. So again, it's Friday, November 29th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It's a free virtual class, and the link to register is in the description. Okay, guys, you know what you got to do. It's it's not even evening; it's nighttime. So you guys have a great night on purpose. Take care.